grateful to be here with all of you. My name is Angela, and I am from Buffalo, New York. I spent a lot of time teaching at the middle school and high school level. I taught English language arts and English. Right now, I am an instructor and faculty at Daemen University. For a little stretch, I was the executive director of distance education there as well. The stretch that I maintained had everything to do with developing policy and working with a whole bunch of attorneys around how we were going to handle AI. And so this thing is a mess and also kind of frightening and also full of great opportunities as well. And what I'm finding, I am a hopeful skeptic here. What I'm finding is the way we use it has everything to do with whether or not it is something that can really nurture great learning experiences and build relationships with people, or whether it's going to corrupt all of that and cause a lot of harm. I have a feeling it's going to be all of those things. And so the purpose of this first session is to really dig into, I wanted to leave you in this quick hour with two really powerful tools. They're the two tools that I am using with students, with my colleagues at Daemen University. I'm using them in every room I'm working in with teachers who are trying to make decisions about how do we make this land really well. And I'm using them also with other people who are professional learning facilitators and find themselves, at the front of a room, supposed to lead sessions where there's been maybe some difference of opinion and perspective and even some tension. So I have two tools that I want to share with you today. One of them is a matrix for decision making that I think you will enjoy. And we're going to play with that matrix. So, and it's inside of my slide deck. So you'll want to go into the chat and take a peek at those slides and maybe open up a copy. You have editing rights with intention, and you can't break it. So don't worry about that. But I'll tell you what you'll be editing shortly. And then the other tool that I want to leave you with is a prompt crafting protocol that helps users to get really good results. And we'll talk about what good results look like. We're going to talk briefly too about plagiarism in this session. I have another session that ends this day today. Session number 2 is all about advanced prompt crafting. Like, what do you, if you want to do something really complicated with AI, how do you prompt it in that way to handle a more complex prompt, and how do you craft it in a way that helps you get that output? Tomorrow, I'm leading 2 additional conversations. One is all about using AI in ethical ways to generate higher quality feedback on student work. And the last conversation tomorrow is for everyone who is finding themselves either hesitant to start reaching agreements around AI in their system because they know that it's kind of a volatile topic and they're not sure how to navigate that conversation, or people who are finding themselves in leadership positions and having to make decisions and help to establish maybe position and policy and vision in a safe way inside of their system. So 4 separate sessions. They do kind of connect to one another, come to some, come to all, but I'm kind of wanting to open up some different sorts of perspectives around all of it. I'm not sure if it is a good session for KG teachers. Tell me what you mean by that. Smita, is that, how do I pronounce your name? Tell me if I've got it wrong. All right, maybe you're not there. There you are. Hi, tell me what you mean. Tell me more about your question. You're muted. Sorry. Smita, you're muted. I can't hear you. And tell me if I pronounced your name wrong. There you go.
Yeah, no, you pronounced correctly.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I'm a kindergarten teacher, and I'm just wondering if this session is useful, especially for making lesson plans or,
Yeah, you're going to learn some basic prompt crafting strategies. And if you want to know more about how to do more complex things like creating lesson plans or using it in more complex ways, my afternoon session today and my last session tomorrow are going to get into that even further.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because this is my first time even learning about AI.
All right. Yeah, then this is a good place for you to probably start. I'm gonna start with some real basics. How about the rest of you? Can you just, we're a small group. If you would introduce yourselves for me really quick. and let me know why you're here. I'll try and pitch the conversation in a direction that's useful for you.
Or perhaps even drop in the chat
Yeah,
where you're
drop it
from
into
and
the
what
chat. That would be great. But if anyone wants to unmute and share, feel free to do that. I'll give you a minute.
where you're from and what grade.
That'd be
Grades.
great. That would be great. All right, I'll have a peek at that in a minute. Again, if you maybe just entered the room, also go ahead and grab my slides. I'm seeing that quite a few of you are in there already, and that's fantastic. I am actually going to start sharing my screen, and we're going to dive in, and I'm going to come back to this chat and get a sense of what you're really interested in just one second. Today's slides are actually interactive, and they're also linked up to some really good resources that I want to leave all of you with. But as I explained when I came in the room, I really wanted to begin by sharing this framework with all of you. So often when we're trying to think about how we might use AI in really ethical ways, this turns into a really squishy and soupy conversation that leaves many people feeling like they don't want to try to experiment with it at all, or that they're going to just get really excited perhaps about using tools and not really think about the ethical consequences of it all because so many people are super excited. And I am someone who is super excited about AI and also very cautious about how I tend to use it. This particular matrix has been very helpful to me. I'm wondering if you've given much thought to what your own AI identity is. And if you haven't had much time to think about that, I'll share what I mean and give you an example of my own. When I think about how AI might be valuable, if I'm thinking with the grain that everyone seems to be going with, who's excited about it, what makes me excited about AI is its potential to actually make me better at what I do because it can grow my natural intelligence. It can also help me design learning experiences that improve agency for everyone inside of it. Those are my two factors that I'm constantly thinking about. Is this application of AI that I am about to think about using, is it going to make me improve my natural intelligence? And could the output, if I use it, actually improve agency for everyone inside of this learning experience? What I'm looking for is a way to use AI that democratizes learning. If it doesn't do that for me, then I really need to give pause. And I need to be thoughtful about what the unintended consequences might be of using it. For instance, there are many examples I'm seeing right now of people using AI in ways that actually undermine the development or deplete the development of natural intelligence. And they really don't improve agency for anyone either. When I think about how some students, some learners, and some users are turning to AI and asking it to do scholarly or intellectual work for them, or develop things in ways that are complex, that actually remove them from that process entirely, and they're just cutting and pasting the output into another sort of form and using it as their own. When they're doing that in a way that actually replaces opportunities for them to sharpen their own saw, I see that as depleting natural intelligence, and I see it as something that doesn't really improve agency at all because it's not building skills and it's not building knowledge either. I'm also seeing situations where people are using tools with certain populations. For instance, if I have a group of 11th grade teachers and some of them are teaching their students how to use AI in rich and really meaningful ways, but the rest of the 11th grade class is not getting that opportunity, we're creating a set of haves and have-nots inside of that situation. This is what a lot of business people are really being very thoughtful about. In my work at Daemen University, everyone on the humanities side of the house was very concerned about AI because they don't want students using it to generate compositions. They don't want them to use it to do their research for them, do their writing for them. But everyone on the business side of the house was very much aware of the fact that in the real world, if students go into careers where they are using AI to give them an edge as a business person, as an attorney, as an accountant, if they're able to produce better work faster, it's going to give them an edge and maybe even help them secure a job that a student who didn't have those privileges might miss out on. And so I think a lot about the privileged way in which we're using this. Some of the trickier applications actually look like they're improving student agency, but if they're doing it at the expense of natural intelligence, we're kind of building a castle out of sand that will eventually wash away. I think of examples where, and I watched this happen, new English language learners in a specific community used AI to be able to formulate a claim. They wanted to make an argument and they wanted to take a stand about something in their community that they needed leaders to take action on. And they used AI to generate all of those materials that they used because they weren't comfortable with the language just yet. And they were very persuasive. But the problem was that as that project began gaining traction, because they did not yet have the skills to be able to keep up with the complex evolution of that project, the whole thing kind of unraveled. And so there are these 4 different kinds of intentions that we need to be thinking about. And I find that if I consider what matters to me and what it means for me to use AI ethically, it means that I'm improving natural intelligence, and it means that the output also has the potential to improve agency for all. If you're in my slides, you're going to see that I've shared 4 different scenarios here. And oftentimes when I first share this particular chart with everyone, they want to play with it. You're not quite sure how it works. I'm going to actually put you in breakout rooms for a few minutes, and all of you have the ability to play with this slide deck. You're all in the same slide deck. So as one group moves one of those scenarios around, all of you will see it, and you might choose to move it somewhere else. All of the tiles are movable and all of you are in the same deck. You're going to notice that you might move something somewhere and someone in another group actually has a different perspective and they move it to a different place. The purpose isn't necessarily in this moment to have right or wrong answers. It's to really get a sense of how the tool might work and what it means, right? So I'm going to put you in those breakout rooms for about 10 minutes and give you the opportunity to discuss these scenarios, to share your own experiences, and to maybe give this matrix a test run and see how it works for you, keeping in mind that you might actually change what's on those axes. You might change those axes to reflect things that are really in alignment with your AI identity and what really matters to you. And I think we could teach our children to do the same thing, particularly in upper elementary, middle school, and high school. Questions before I put you in those breakout rooms. Rick, do you need to do that or should I do that? So it was great kind of popping into your rooms and getting a sense of how you're beginning to think about all of this. One of the conversations that we just had in one of them was about the fact that tools like this really slow our thinking around how we're using AI. And I think that they can make us a bit more critical and they can open some conversations that are a bit more nuanced. I'm finding in my work with both students and with adults in different contexts that this is sort of taking a lot of the tension and the fast decision making out of the work. And that's really led to, I think, more quality implementation. Do any of you have perspectives around how you might either use this tool the way it is or adapt it. If you want to drop an idea into the chat or even unmute and share some perspective, that would be great. Anyone? Might you adapt a tool like this or use it just as it is? Go ahead and drop ideas into the chat. Keep thinking on that. We're going to kind of tilt the conversation toward prompt crafting. Oftentimes people kind of go here first when it really makes sense, to be a little bit more thoughtful about, how are we using AI before we just dive into what does it look like to do it well. Once you have some notion of whether or not your use of it is something that's really ethical, thinking about how to talk with a chat bot can be a little bit daunting at first. So there are some very basic concepts that might be helpful to some of you. When you're a brand new user, even today, when you're in the room, if we begin to play with it, most people start by using what's called a zero shot prompt. And that means that you open up ChatGPT or you open up Claude or any other tool of your choice, and you think a little bit about what you want it to do for you. And you tell it to do something in one sentence, like define motif. You put that right into the chatbot, and usually what will happen is you'll get output that is usually accurate if it's something that's simple that you're asking it to do, but it might not be framed in a way that is most useful to you. So for instance, if I teach 8th grade, I might chat with ChatGPT or Claude. After it defines motif, I might want it to refine its response. So I might create a multi-part request. Define motif for my students. Use a popular song. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'd like each of you to drop a simple prompt into the chat for something that you might ask a chat bot to do for you. It might have something to do with making your own work more efficient, like defining a new concept or term that you're not really certain about, designing a lesson or a unit. It might be something that you're asking it to generate for your students as well. But take a minute and either try to create a zero shot prompt or a few shot prompt that you might actually put into a chat bot like ChatGPT. Take a minute and share your ideas right in the chat with us. So then, Laureen, you could frame it as create a simple text or book for EAL students. And that's a really good example of a zero shot prompt. Oh, and if you look at what Stacy's doing, she's adding a bit of nuance. She wants it to be inspirational. Summarize the PDF attached in bullet format, highlight key recommendations and areas for further research. So that is a multi-part request, even though it doesn't have multi-part or multiple lines. Cheryl's is simple. And also what that's one of the best utilities of a tool like this. I love what Kristen and Chelsea are both sharing, if that's both of you in the same room, using prompts to create examples. So mentor sentences, mentor texts, even for students. It's a beautiful way to begin using the tool. When we ask it to do simple things like define something or come up with an example of using commas in a series, the results are usually pretty solid. But the more complex we're asking it to engage, the more complex the request, like create a book or give recommendations for short stories, we might not be as satisfied with the output because the volume of information that it's producing and where that's coming from and the context in which you plan to use it might not be something that the machine is really clear about. That's why you might want to get into a chat. So I might say, define motif for my students, use a popular song, hit enter and see what output is produced. And then from there, I could say, make that response accessible to 8th grade students. Hit enter again, and the output will change. Include a strategy that they might try to create motif in their own work. Hit enter, and the output might change, and then translate that into Spanish, because the group that I'm working with, that might be their home language. I'm going to ask you to choose any chat bot that you would like to experiment with for the next few minutes, and I'm going to give you a little bit of time to open it on your own device. You might choose something like ChatGPT, even the free version, or Claude, or Gemini. These are very popular chat bots. You may have to give it, you might have to sign in order to play with it. And if you're not comfortable doing that, I completely understand. But I would love it if at least a few of you take the opportunity to open a chat bot and to use either 0-shot or few-shot prompting to begin a conversation. And we're going to actually leap off of it and deepen our work together with the tool in just 1 minute. Give you a minute or two just to open up a chat bot. And then whatever you put into the chat, challenge an AI chat bot to do that for you. Take your chat example, put it right into the machine. And then maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being fantastic and 1 being terrible, drop a number in the chat and let me know how you were feeling about the output. Yes, I'm going to put into the chat ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. If you Google any of those, you'll find them. I hope that helps, Cheryl. Sure. So go ahead and play, and then leave me a 1 to 10. 10 is fabulous, 1 is terrible. How you feeling about the output that you received? That's when I get very happy, especially if it's 11 o'clock at night and I have a migraine and I know I need to walk into a classroom the next morning and I want something really fabulous. I know how to find TED Talks, and I'm perfectly great at creating summaries. But when I'm exhausted, like I was 2 nights ago, I'm teaching this summer and I have 100 students and they just did research papers. I had a raging migraine. I was exhausted and I didn't want to show up and just phone it in the next day. AI helped me find some great resources that still allowed me to teach an engaging lesson. Could I have done it on my own? Yes. And I would have lost a lot of sleep that night. So I really appreciated it. Yeah, so there are all of these really great purposes for using AI. And for the most part, it often, and it's going to get better and better at providing great output. But a lot of times you'll hear people complain and they'll say it was completely inaccurate. Or it didn't do a very good job. Teachers always do it better. And usually what I find is that it is a truly a garbage in, garbage out endeavor. And so sometimes, especially if what I'm asking it to do is a bit more complex, like writing a book or designing a unit or creating a lesson for a specific group of learners, this particular protocol really helps. And I call it crafts. When I think about the prompt that I'm creating, I begin with a call to action. What do I want to know? What am I asking ChatGPT to do, or Gemini or Claude? And it's usually that 0-shot prompt. Explain the concept of motif in literature. Then I ask it to assume a specific role. Assume the role of an encouraging middle school teacher as you do this. I want it to act like me. Then think about the audience. Use words that a 13-year-old new English language learner will understand. I'm thinking about how I want it to produce the output. Offer a response that can be placed on a poster and include a simple example that refers to a Taylor Swift song. Then I think through some technicalities. Don't include bullet points. Make sure you put your output in complete sentences. And this last piece is hugely important. Use neutral language that does not assume the characteristics, roles, or preferences based on protected characteristics like race, gender, or age. Here's my big problem with AI. We have a chicken and egg situation going on, in that the algorithm that artificial intelligence runs on, as many of you know, it's built on the output and the results of our socio-political and racial history in the West. And what that means is that people whose voices have dominated the research and dominated the conversation, they're the ones whose work is most prolific online. And so the algorithm is really pulling from privileged voices and voices that have been erased or not invited to the table ever in history. They're not contributing to the output. The only way to ensure a more equitable and balanced response from a chatbot is to ensure that more people who live on the margins are contributing their work to the machine. And the problem with that is that asking people to do that kind of labor simply to power AI, that's really problematic in and of itself. We need to be really thoughtful and conscientious about this. And one of the ways that we can begin doing that is by ensuring that the output that we receive from AI is far more attuned to the needs and interests of people who live on the margin. I will tell you that early on, and I know that even in recent weeks, the algorithm is improving, but in recent weeks, this was not the case, but in the past it was. The first time that my department, the education department at Daemen University, challenged ChatGPT to produce some output for us, it directly stated that LGBTQ people could not have children and that families were not comprised of two moms or two dads. And that was deeply problematic. And we had to work through our protocol and fine tune it to be able to get the machine to produce output that was less problematic. And so that last piece of this acronym has been a very powerful revision. This is the language that I tend to use over and over again. I'm wondering if you can think about something more complex that you might want AI to produce for you and how you might use a protocol like this to prepare the machine to produce better output. One of the things that I will often do as well is I will use this frame to come up with a prompt, explain the concept of motif in literature, assume the role of an engaging middle school teacher as you do this, use words that a 13-year-old new English learner will understand, offer your response in complete sentences and include an example that refers to a Taylor Swift song. And then, of course, compose your response in a way that is culturally sensitive. When I don't get good output, I usually need to tinker with one of those elements. And when I do, the output is better. If you're coming tomorrow to my more advanced prompting workshop around writing specifically, you're going to see how I use AI to generate better feedback on my students' work in alignment with a very complex rubric. And this is where I find myself often, especially at the beginning of the process, needing to fine tune my prompt to get it to generate the feedback in the way that I want it to. What I want to do is give you a minute and once again, try to come up with a prompt, this time using this particular protocol. Drop it into the chat so that everyone here can see how you might create a more complex prompt that includes these other elements. Take a minute. Some people have used, and it's one of the reasons I'm giving you the slides, and I'm actually going to give you access to a workbook in a minute. Some people have actually taken this protocol and they've made a poster out of it for their classroom for students to use if they're working with middle school and high school students. Yeah.
Were you reading my mind? I have a
Yeah,
space.
it's why I tend to share my resources with everybody because I know that people want to put them into documents for students or their colleagues or whatever, and that's completely fine.
Well, or in the case of this crafts model literally the space between my two monitors right there. So that
Yeah, you
it's
can.
guiding, right?
And honestly, I don't use it all the time. It's only when I'm asking AI to do something more complicated. It helps me get the output I want faster. And it also, when I'm frustrated and it's producing garbage, it gives me things to think about tinkering with to make for a better prompt. And then I usually get the output that I like. And I'm going to model that more in another session about more advanced prompting.
I think it's important to add there are distinct and significant differences between ChatGPT free and
Yeah.
ChatGPT subscribed.
Yeah, and you're taking me into this next conversation,
Yeah.
and I'll go there even as people might be sharing examples of their prompts in the chat. There are 3 specific chat bots that I've done a lot of work with and research around. If you have my slides, you can click on the link that says "Let's compare" at the top, and it'll take you to a really powerful and recent article that gets into the features. But here's what I know about the differences between the 3, and they change all the time. So you need to know that every time I'm doing a conversation about AI, I will log in the morning to see if anything has changed with these tools because they're constantly improving. Um, Claude, which was created by Anthropic, I find, and lots of other people too, it's in the research, Claude handles really complex instructions very well. And it will accept a lot of input in the form of attachments, and it can make sense of it in a really efficient way. Claude is valued for its analysis, its complex way of handling input, and its nuance in the results that it returns. Many people feel that ethics and that high stakes queries, this has been something of a priority with developers. They really wanted to create a tool that they felt was very ethical for people to use and that could handle sensitive queries as well as that heavy input. One of the ways that it does that is Claude was the first tool to not train on user data. And you'll hear about this a lot where people will say, well, I'm not going to put anything into ChatGPT because it takes everything that you put into it and it makes it its own. It improves the algorithm by training on user input. Claude has not done that from the beginning. It does not train on user data by default. Gemini, which is a Google product, is good for daily use. The thing that makes Gemini a little bit different is it does have multimodal capabilities, so it will deal with image a little bit differently and in a more robust way than Claude. There's a lighter focus on ethics. It handles moderate input. And many people, have reported that it lacks a certain technical knowledge that Claude has. ChatGPT is great for daily use, single shot prompting, even more complex prompt. It too has multimodal capabilities. It's trained to avoid harm. It'll handle moderate input. You have to choose in your settings for it to not train on your data, though. It doesn't do that by default. And one of the things that people criticize ChatGPT for is that it will produce very confident responses. The tone of the output and the response is very confident, but people sometimes see that there's inaccuracies there. And so I'm often asked, like, what am I using? I am personally loving Claude right now, and I'm going to demonstrate how I use it to do some very complex things in a future session. But I like it because it handles really heavy input and it's not training on my data or my students' data, and they feel very comfortable with me using it for that reason. I wanted to end with just this quick conversation about surveillance tools, like this popular one called GPT-0, which you're welcome to visit if you would like. These are tools where you can actually try to get a sense of whether or not your students have used AI inappropriately. So when you go to GPT-0 and you click on it, it opens up. You don't even have to log in. And you can, for instance, if you feel a student's paper was plagiarized, you can copy it, you can paste it here, and it'll check the origin of the work and tell you whether or not allegedly the student used AI to produce it. There's just one problem with that. It has a very high false positive rate. And most of the kids who are being caught, using AI inappropriately, the false positives are targeting kids who live on the margins. LGBTQ, or not LGBTQ kids, are BIPOC scholars, and specifically, sorry. So one of the things that I want you to know and keep in mind is that, sorry, kids will recycle their work across different chatbots. So they'll have ChatGPT produce something, and then they'll put it into Claude, and then they'll put it into another GPT tool. And then they'll ask it to write like a 10th grader, write like a 7th grader, and they'll keep recycling it and getting various AI tools to change the output. By the time you are putting it into a detector, it's not going to detect it. Last night, I had AI generate 5 papers for me. And then I went into GPT-0. All 5 papers were 100% AI generated. GPT-0 said all of them were human. So the detectors don't really work. And if you actually want the article, you can click on this photo and it'll take you right to the research that shows you the information that you might want to know about false positive rates. One of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is drop into the chat and reflect a little bit on what's been most helpful over the last hour and how I can help you more. Because what I will do is I will drop Rick an email where I'll link out to other resources or tools or other work that I've done to be able to be more helpful to you in ways that I might not have been able to in the last hour. One of the things I'm sharing with you, though, on the last slide, if you click on a little parting gift, you're going to notice that there's a handbook here. I've actually spent the last almost 2 years now doing a lot of training for the Bureau of Education and Research around AI. And although this book is designed for grades 6 through 12 teachers, elementary and primary teachers, if you're using AI for your own purposes, you'll appreciate this text as well. If you scroll past all of their stuff, there is a table of contents here. And what you're going to notice is that many of my slides today have page numbers in the upper corners, pages 16 through 21, page 27, page 25. What I'm referring to is that book. And so if you look here and you go into this resource, I've left a ton of different tools, some really great articles, all of my favorite tools, some protocols for use in your classroom, and the slides that I've shared with you in this very brief hour, they link out to other resources and tools in this handbook that you might really appreciate taking a deeper dive into. But if you would, take a minute. I'm going to stop sharing. What questions do you have for me? We have just a few more minutes left, but I'm happy to answer them. And if there are specific things that you would like more support with, drop it into the chat and I'll be sure to make sure I send a follow-up email too. Questions?
I have one for you, if it's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm just wondering, I'm just not very good at AI. And when you're using Canva especially, is there a way of uploading a presentation or a document and saying, can you please redesign it to look differently or look specific ways?
There are some new tools that are emerging. They're more vendor-based tools, so you're not going to use a chatbot to do that. But one of the things that you might appreciate is inside of this handbook. Let me find the page for you, and you can flag it and you can go play with it. In the handbook, it's called These Are a Few of My Favorite Things. And I'm going to actually share my screen again. Show you where it is. it's this page. These are a few of my favorite things. It's page 23. And when you go to the very bottom, it says a few of my favorite things. I update this all the time. So these are very specific AI tools that do very specific things. And so when you see things around presentations or multimodal design, these are tools that you might use. And I also know that if you Google, someone just mentioned it, and I haven't used one before, so I'm not really sure what it is, but let's take a peek really quick. AI tools that design presentations. Yes, this is the one that one of my friends uses. It's called Beautiful AI, and allegedly it does that. But I have not used it before, and no one's paying me to say this is a great tool either, just so that you know. But this is one that a friend of mine has been using. I will say this, I have used the AI features inside of Canva, and I've used them inside of other tools as well. I haven't been happy with how they handle presentation design or redesign. And that might just be because I'm not good at prompting it well yet, right? Like I'm just kind of getting a sense of how to use it. Jane, is there a way of checking to see if writing is AI generated that doesn't give so many false positives? There is not. But what you can do is start thinking about how you might shift instruction. One of the things that might be very useful is to challenge students to produce writing or other content based on their personal experiences, because AI can't do that for them. So if a piece of their work needs to be referencing or inspired by something that they have personally experienced, they're going to have to speak to that, and AI is not going to be able to help them. I'm also focusing more on documenting the learning process and focusing more on how students making their learning visible in my classes and documenting that learning and reflecting on their learning through the whole process, so that when they produce work that seems like it's AI generated, I can have really respectful conversations with them where I say, all right, let's take a look at this paper you just created, and I want to bump it up against your process work. It seems very different. Can you talk with me about that? And as long as I'm not coming off in this overly threatening way, students are usually fessing up, and then we get to have a good conversation about why they made that choice. And I'm learning a lot as a result. I know that's probably not the answer you want, but it's the best one I have right now. Those AI detection tools are terrible. And I'm also concerned a teacher is going to get sued because they're going to accuse a kid. They're going to use the tool as their evidence. And because it has such a high false positive rate, I sat in rooms with attorneys last year at Daemen University who advised us never to accuse a kid of using AI and fall back on an AI detection tool as our proof, right? Because they're not reliable. Yeah.
I was in a session yesterday, and a person well versed in AI, and this research indicated that at a different level, you could think of every article created on AI as original writing.
Yeah.
And so you shouldn't really make the case it's plagiarized because it's original writing.
That's interesting. It's just not the student. It's so sticky.
Is it the student's writing? Yeah, no. Different.
Those of you that are asking for the handbook really quick, I'm sorry to cut you off, Rick.
No, I can drop the handbook into the chat if that helps.
Yep, I just put it there, and it's also on the last page of the slides. So if you're in the slide deck, it says I've left you a little gift. That's the handbook. You can click on it right there. I have a lot of other free content. So if you click on stay in touch, there's a ton of other free stuff there, and you're welcome to use it as you wish. Thank you all for being here. I know this was a really fast conversation. I really mean it when I say stay in touch. I'm still learning about all of this too, but I hope some of this was helpful to you, and maybe I'll see you in another session.